Hello, this is Michelle Tackett, and I'm here with gorgeous Erica Burns, and we're going to talk about her audiobook.
Hi, Michelle. I'm
So,
so happy to be able to be here with you today.
don't you just look lovely? And I want to ask you a question about your book or
Absolutely.
audiobook. What kind of inspired you? What was the reason behind it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was very sort of kind of on the whim, like not something that I've really been, dreaming about per se. It never, when um, went out to LA initially to pursue acting, did I think, oh, I want to do audiobooks. But what happened is that when I was out there about 2 years or so into being out there, I joined a company called Benstown and Benztown. And what originally started out as like me partaking in mock radio calls where I'd call in pretending to be someone in a scenario and have a lot of ad-libbing fun became something more since COVID hit, which was now basically more or less audiobooks and audiobook narration jobs that they were now providing and we were auditioning for. And so I started auditioning and I got my first one back in July. It was for how to procreate a healthy family. Of course, perhaps it was a little bit more on the conservative side of things, but I found it fitting nevertheless for me as a transgender person, transgender woman to be narrating this. I thought, so what? Maybe this is a good thing after all, like to bridge the gap between, conservative religious values per se and the values of, the transgender community to show that, at the end of the day, we all should come together and not have to feel isolated or left out or rejected, which is what I have felt for a lot of my own life. And since then, I've booked two more audiobook narration jobs, and I'm continuing to submit auditions for other ones. And I'm very grateful and excited for, the opportunities that lie ahead with it all.
And I think that's great that you want to bridge the gap because I think some words have been poisoned by radicals because yes, there are a lot of just awful conservatives and a lot of awful religious people, but I've also met a lot of conservatives who have accepted me and who think what the government tries to do to us is wrong, and the same with religious people. I think it's just a matter of talking to people and let them get to know us as human beings.
Yeah,
And with that, they're like, whoa, they're just like me, just a little different, but they're not freaks or nothing like that. We're just people.
exactly.
And I think that because I think conservative can also mean things like being traditional with family structure, which, you don't judge other people, but it's how you want to live. And you can be shy and more conservative on spending your money and things like that. And I don't think it necessarily has to mean something bad. So I think that trying to get people to understand that not everyone who is on this or this is bad, because guess what? People are different. We all have different wants, needs, beliefs,
Right.
loves, hates, likes, dislikes. We're not the same.
Exactly. We're not. We're absolutely not. And I appreciate what you said too about, what the government has been trying to do to us, because I think ultimately, there is the hate in churches, don't get me wrong, and from a lot of hateful religious conservatives that aren't being very Christian when they condemn us. But I do think a lot of pain can also stem from the government and its treatment of us over the years and how it's decided to bring acceptance to us only when it's convenient for it and its own agendas and not what's best for us as the individuals we are and our well-being and growth.
Exactly. Like right now, the Republicans are pushing an anti-trans agenda, but guess what? There are some Democratic politicians who are joining in with them
Mm-hmm.
because of TERS, because some Democrats and stuff and liberals and leftists are trapped in, do we support trans people or do we support feminists? And I think that's something that everybody needs to get through their head. TERFs are just toxic,
Yeah,
hateful people.
they are. They are.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a porn star who was also a self-proclaimed TERF,
Mm.
say that trans women should be, let's just say it has to do with a rope and a noose.
Oh God.
Oh
Wow.
yeah, I wish I was kidding. And the BBC, which is supposed to be a progressive newspaper, actually posted her article without even thinking about
Hmm.
or checking what she had done in the past. And then, of course, when they got a lot of flack for it, they took it down. So that just goes to show that even people who say they're progressive or on the left, they're not necessarily, that doesn't mean that they're our friends either.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
mean, I think that's a misconception, like if people are right wing, they hate us. If they're left wing, they love us. And that's just simply not the case all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I will testify to the fact that, I live in Maryland right now, a blue state. And, I'm still being denied coverage for, facial feminization surgery by insurance. But they sure won't, um, you know, uh, prevent the mask wearing and everything like that. So they're liberal in some aspects and then not so liberal in others. But I guess what it is just um, it just goes to show that there isn't, it's not altogether. It's like, some people want to try to have it both ways, where they can say they're liberal, but then not be very accepting of us as LGBTQ people at the same time. And it's like, just if you're going to be liberal, then be accepting of us, otherwise it's just, you're being very contradictory and clearly just doing what's convenient for you and not what is actually, the right thing to be doing.
I mean, it's just so hypocritical because, if you can't support, it's not the LG movement or the LB movement or the G, it's LGBTQIA, it's all this stuff. If you can't support all of that, then you're not an ally.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You're not. Period.
No.
You're not. Yeah.
And I think that it's okay to be trans and religious because I am and you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think everybody needs to get that out of their head that we're not all going to think the same, but that doesn't make us enemies.
Exactly.
Like, get to talk to people and find out what they're like as a person instead of just going all in and thinking of them as the enemy and that they want to harm you. And some that will be the case, but a lot of people it won't be. They're just misinformed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you hoping to educate people on how, like everybody that, like even the ones of us who are religious, but we're still pro-trans, I mean, I think that's something that gets lost is like, oh, well, if you're religious, you can't be trans. That's just completely silly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's such a huge gap there, and there are a number of trans people who are not going to be very happy about being religious. I think a lot of transgender people are atheist or are agnostic and not religious because they go along with that whole rhetoric that religion hates them, and to fit in they have to subscribe to a certain way, which really is ultimately not very liberating. I'd say it's a very sandbox, like you have your little sandbox that you can play in and be happy in, but try to step outside of that. Don't dare step outside of that. You'll get the bat down on you. So, and I personally have seen myself daring to step outside of that because I've realized, well, there's one thing, there's more to life than my transgender identity. And for another thing, I personally have found that the culture to not add up as being a very liberating culture in general, particularly when it comes to, secular aspects. I think there's a lot of times there is a lot of hypersensitivity, and don't get me wrong, I think it's very important to be sensitive, but I think to the point where one is isolating others and not, bridging the gap. I think that's where, sadly, that can help lead, unfortunately, to other kids growing up having to go through the same things because, you know, like back in the 80s where the goal was to pass and not have anybody know you were transgender. Now it's more like, you know, we subscribe to our own little subculture of word police and everything. And you know, or we sequester ourselves to big cities like LA and New York and don't really, you know, go to many other places. And I don't know, I personally find a fulfillment in being somewhere that's not where I'm, you know, sequestered to a big, expensive, overcrowded city just because, you know, that's where I'll fit in and have my rights, which again just doesn't feel the most liberating ultimately.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you can't just box yourself in because we always try to say, hey, we're trying to fit outside the norm. Well, okay, then accept trans people who are outside the norm.
Exactly.
And I'm not talking about certain individuals who like to use us to, you know, just to kiss butt to the haters. No. I'm just talking about people who aren't pro-trans, but they're still like, hey, I do lean a little more to this side, or, you know, I do this, you know.
And I think
I
the
just
sad
think,
thing, oh, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm so sorry.
it's okay.
I was just going to say, I think the sad thing about it is that, you know, it has become a political thing, a medical condition, which is a lot of the times the case. A lot of people may even be offended by saying, oh, I don't have a medical condition. But at the end of the day, transgender, when I learned about it and myself, gender dysphoria was what it was. And that shouldn't be a political thing on either side of the, you know, it shouldn't be like, oh, you know, to have gender dysphoria means you have to be liberal. You know, it's like, no, you have a medical condition. And it just happens that a lot of people who have been conservative or Republican have not supported that, whereas people who have been Democrat and liberal have. But, you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's, again, just one part of us. And the politics aspect is just, it's unfortunate that, you know, it's had to limit us, or there's been that pressure to be limited to having to be super liberal and live in super liberal blue states that, you know, a lot of times, you know, are very saturated and, you know, quite frankly, I hate to say it, but filled with trans social martyrdom, you know, and I'd rather, I feel like our lives are meant to be more than that.
Yeah, and I will say this though, like, people get it wrong. Like, being transgender is not a mental illness, but having gender dysphoria, you know, that's a different thing. And transitioning lowers that or gets rid of the dysphoria.
Exactly.
So I think that's a message we have to get out there clear.
Yeah.
You know, and I know trans people who don't even have gender dysphoria, but, you know, the thing is, most of us do.
Yeah.
And is gender dysphoria or gender incongruence a condition? Yes. But being trans ourselves is not a disorder because we're happier.
Right.
And I think that's just something we need to get through to people.
Exactly.
Well, Erica, this has been a lovely conversation, and we're going to pick up with this next time, where we're going to actually talk about what you're trying to get out of this with your book.
Yes.
And it's been lovely. You're a lovely person, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And everybody out there, she does have an audiobook coming out next year, and when it has a solid release date, we'll keep you informed.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for talking with me today. And I definitely look forward to, you know, our future discussions.
Yeah, you have a good day, sweetheart.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Cute.